Welcome back to the In Chamber. I'm your host, Tom Schuman. Today, we're pleased to bring you the fourth in our series of conversations with the Indiana Chamber's 31st Annual Award winners. We hope you've enjoyed the previous discussions with Dave Ricks of Eli Lilly, the Ogletree Deacons Business Leader of the Year, Indiana State Health Commissioner Dr. Christina Box, the Bai Luger Government Leader of the Year, and Brad Bostic of HC1, the Indiana Wesleyan University Dynamic Leader of the Year. All those conversations remain available wherever you get your podcast. While those first three are individual awards that certainly have a team element to them, the fourth recognition, the PNC Community of the Year honor, is a group effort that is orchestrated by the leader of the city. With that said, Fort Wayne Mayor Tom Henry, welcome to the In Chamber.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Mayor, for many years, bear with me, my little story to kick it off here. So for many years, the Pittsburgh Pirates played in a baseball facility known as Three Rivers Stadium.
Right.
So in an ironic note, they now play in PNC Park, courtesy of that same sponsor that we mentioned of the 2020 Community of the Year. So while Pittsburgh has the Allegheny, the Monongahela, and the Ohio rivers, Fort Wayne has the St. Mary's, St. Joseph, and Maumee. You've talked in previous conversations about the city embracing the rivers. Talk about how that's taking place.
Well, over the years, we struggled a lot with our rivers because we looked at them as kind of an enemy to our community. They flooded a lot. Unfortunately, over the years, a lot of businesses and residents were built close to the river, and we really didn't have much control. So we had some devastating high water events over the years. But about the turn of this century, around the year 2000, we decided that this couldn't go on. So the mayor at that time began to put together a series of improvements along the rivers, and we began to really dedicate ourselves to turning that whole image of our rivers around and trying to make them more of an asset to our community. And not only did we build levees and dikes and so on to hold back the rivers, but we decided to embrace the rivers as part of the assets to our community. So we've built parks now along the river. We've actually dedicated some areas where we've actually cleaned up all of the property in the area so that rivers could overflow into a particular area that did not damage person or property. And it's had a tremendous transformational effect on our community. And it's really fun to watch what's going on.
So as I understand, a promenade park certainly being kind of the centerpiece of that, but the reactions, I think even you and others in the community have been surprised by how the public has embraced these opportunities.
You're absolutely right. The amount of citizens that have now become active participants in our riverfront initiative. We have kayaks and canoes, boats that were coming out of everywhere that we didn't know existed. People are bringing them to the rivers, pontoons. Now people are asking me to build additional docking areas for boats, and I even had a request to open up the rivers even more, which would be quite a challenge. But I think it's all in an attempt to really utilize the rivers much more than we have in the past, because as I mentioned, rivers in the past were considered an enemy, and we fought to keep them away from everything. And now it's been completely turned around. You don't want to swim in our rivers, but people do jump off their boats sometimes, and we have to kind of correct them. But what that tells me is they are really having a lot of fun on our rivers.
So what's the favorite thing you see when you get to view what people are enjoying, or maybe yourself or friends or family? What's the favorite thing you see happening on the rivers?
Actually, it's the informal competition. We do have some competitive races on the river with different types of boating events. But when I stand on some of the bridges and I look out and see families competing with one another in their own way, whether it's, again, canoes or kayaks or these I don't know what these things are they stand up on, but they actually stand up on these things and they'll race each other. So it's just this informal competition now among friends and families that are taking place without any type of assistance by any type of organization or government. They're just doing it on their own, which tells me that they are just having a lot of fun now on rivers that, again, we used to try to push away.
A little friendly competition is never a bad thing, is it?
Not at all.
Well, certainly related to that, Mayor, is downtown, and downtown development is critical, whatever community we go to. We've talked in the past and featured in our magazine about the development of Parkview Field about a dozen years ago and how that was kind of a catalyst. But talk about on the business side of the equation, what have been some of the keys for that business growth and expansion downtown?
I don't think there's any question that Parkview Field has served as somewhat of a catalyst for additional development downtown, particularly with the hospitality industry. Since Parkview Field brings in thousands of people to their games, of course, this year, obviously, it's been a little bit different, but historically, Parkview Field holds about 8,000 to 9,000 citizens to a ball game. Well, if it's a packed stadium after the game or even before the game, people flock into our downtown to dine and to enjoy some of the other amenities of downtown. That wasn't there prior to Parkview Field. When we built Parkview Field back in 2007, 2008, it was an experiment. We didn't know whether or not it was going to take off. Our blueprint for downtown showed that it probably would, but we had a lot of resistance by our community. In fact, it took some real profiles and courage by our city council and by our mayor at the time to continue to move that forward. I inherited that particular development in 2008, and we continued. But once that was built, then all of a sudden somebody wanted to build a series of apartments next door to it. And then they wanted to build some townhomes. And then these restaurants started coming about. And then more arts offerings. It just began to snowball. Not only that, but we've had a significant increase in the amount of people that are now living downtown. So it really has become a place where people are living and working and playing. And that's been a tremendous statement for our city.
And Mayor, you've had the other part of the equation too. You've had the traditional business investment, I'll phrase it, the law firms, the insurance companies, the ash brokerages, the others that have really, I guess, reinvested back into their operations.
That you're absolutely right. Downtown has always been kind of banking center, government center, legal center, and people, I think, expected those industries to be downtown. But now we're trying to expand that base. My philosophy since the day I became mayor was that we needed a vibrant, thriving, inviting downtown. As far as economic development, you're not going to move your company into a city that has a decaying downtown. It's just not going to happen. Conversely, if you have a downtown that's inviting and has a great arts offering and hospitality and so on, then that improves the probability of you bringing your company into our city. So we've invested a lot of money in partnerships and a lot of our government money in trying to make our downtown a point of destination. And I believe it's paying off.
So before we started recording this conversation, Tony, our producer, was talking about going to college in Fort Wayne at St. Francis, but then, coming back years later and seeing what Fort Wayne is like. You smiled during that conversation, but I imagine it's something you hear quite a bit. Talk about that reaction of people and how important this is to attracting talent back to your city.
Well, Tony was right. Back in the 1990s, our downtown was pretty dormant. We had lost a lot of our major manufacturers. International Harvester had moved out. General Electric, for the most part, had moved out. Tokheim had moved out. And this was that industrial bust that took place in the late 80s, early 90s. And Fort Wayne is a manufacturing community, so that hit us extremely hard. And while we were trying to recoup and come up with some new areas of concentration like healthcare and so on, we were going through a very difficult time. So in the 1990s, our downtown was quiet. The old expression that they roll up the sidewalks at 5 o'clock was kind of true. And that hurt. That hurt our community because obviously employers were not looking at Fort Wayne because we didn't have anything to offer. But again, we began to invest. I'll go back to Parkview Field for a second. That certainly was a major investment and a major experiment that paid off. And now more and more employers are beginning to see that downtown Fort Wayne has something to offer. And we've also tried to capitalize heavily on public-private partnerships. If we want to attract an employer or business or an offering downtown, I don't mind sitting down across the table and figuring out a way that we can do this together to help lessen the risk of an employer to move into our community.
So, Mayor, let's talk a little bit. You mentioned International Harvester, that history a little bit. If I'm correct, you were starting maybe your service on City Council around that time in the early to mid '80s. You've been in Fort Wayne most of your life. You're one of 17 siblings in your family. So
Right.
I mention all that to talk about Fort Wayne has experienced its ups and downs. Talk about that maybe a little more, but most importantly, in your mind, what does make this city so special?
For a long time, I thought it was the fact we had come up with some economic incentives, some financial incentives that we could use to compete with other communities. And I think for a while, we were able to put together some nice tips districts and maybe some tax abatement programs that were creative and again, grants and loans and so on. And again, I think for a while that served us well, but it wasn't long before other communities began offering the same thing. So we had to come up with other incentives that went beyond the financial foundation. So we began to invest heavily in our quality of life, our quality of place. As we talked to more employers, it was obvious to us that if they were going to move employees into our community or they were going to expand their company, they wanted more than just money to themselves. They wanted to make sure that their employees were comfortable. So we began to look at our arts offerings. And now we're in the process of building an actual arts campus downtown. We invested heavily in our park system. We have about 90 parks now in our community. You just mentioned Promenade Park. That's our newest offering. We began looking at our educational offerings. We now have almost 30,000 college students in Fort Wayne. And so we wanted to help them expand their offerings to, again, provide something above and beyond the financial incentive. So we began looking at a lot of different our trail system. We now have over 100 miles of trails that go in and around our city. We've invested heavily in that because that's something that employers told us they wanted. They wanted to have a trail system that could be used for recreational purposes, for exercise and so on. So that's where we spent the last several years really hitting the quality of place component very hard. And again, that seems to have helped us a little bit.
Mayor, our other award winners, the previous conversations we've had certainly have focused on 2020, their great responses to the pandemic, helping to save lives. Talk about the coronavirus from the community perspective, what some of the challenges have been and some of what you've tried to do to help out businesses and citizens in Fort Wayne.
Well, we hit it right off the bat with a number of offerings to our business community. We try to partner with them on PPE and other types of small business loans and grants to help them survive the initial COVID impact. And we continue to offer that, but we're really struggling right now with the increase in our city and in our county. Quite frankly, I believe our state is suffering as well. but I think the biggest problem, we keep hammering away at our citizens through press conferences where I stand with physicians and with the Board of Health people, and we keep pounding on our citizens. You have got to follow the recommendations from our medical community. You've got to mask. You've got to practice safe distancing. But our biggest problem right now, quite frankly, are the young people. People in their high teens, early 20s. They don't want a mask. They like to gather, and I understand the socialization aspect, but they make it extremely hard for us to move our community forward with some level of consistency as far as maintaining a flat curve. It's been extremely hard.
It is. I think, we see it in so many places. It's a little bit of that invincibility for themselves. And I know your message and the message throughout the state has been you're not necessarily protecting yourself, you're protecting others. And I just think the length of this, Mayor, has been the challenge, whether we call it the fatigue or whatever. But so as we're getting ready to head into 2021, still with a lot of uncertainty around this. How do you look at this going forward? What some of the keys are?
Well, quite frankly, Tom, I think that you and I are going to be probably sitting here next year with a little more comfort, but not a complete satisfaction that we've gotten through this thing. And again, I'm not a physician and I'm really going out on a limb, but I don't expect any type of true acceptable vaccine until probably the earliest of December, probably more January, February. And then it's going to take a considerable amount of time to vaccinate those individuals that need to be taken care of. My understanding is they're going to start out with the most vulnerable first, of those that are compromised, whether it's age or health concerns and so on, and then move down the ladder to probably the youngest being probably the most or the least vulnerable right now. But that's going to take a while. We have 330 million people in this country. It's going to take a while. So again, I think you and I will be talking to each other again, maybe this time next year with an increased comfort level, but I don't think we're going to be satisfied. I think it's going to take at least a year to 18 months before we really get our arms around this thing. And I know that is not a happy statement to make. People may get upset with me, but I think that's the reality.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a realistic one, though. So, yeah, let's move away from that. I mentioned you being pretty much a lifelong Fort Wayne resident, business career, being a small business owner. Give the listeners a little bit of sense of what you did and how that helped prepare you for your role now.
Well, when I got out of graduate school, I went into healthcare and worked at one of the major hospital systems for a few years. And then I left and started my own hospital purchasing network. At that time, group purchasing was a relatively new concept. So I was able to pull together a pretty good group of hospitals, and we began to buy collectively and obviously decrease the cost of the hospitals. And I ran that for a period of time. Ultimately sold that company, then started up my own insurance agency and healthcare consulting firm. And then I became mayor. So I sold those off. But as I talk to young entrepreneurs and those wishing to enter into the business environment by starting their own, my best advice to them, and it continues to be the advice not only to entrepreneurs, but actually to those wanting to enter into the political arena, there is nothing more important to me than relationships. If you're not real strong in finance, you can hire people that are. If you're not real strong in manufacturing, if that's where you want to go, you can hire people that understand computer-aided manufacturing and other components. But if you don't get along with people, you're probably not going to be very successful in the business arena. You have got to be able to have a personality and an approach that makes people comfortable. Again, that's true in the political arena as well. If you can't attract citizens and voters to your side of the ledger as far as having a warm, congenial type of personality, you're not going to get anywhere. So I was successful in small business, I think, because I tried that and it worked relatively well for me. I think in the political arena, I was on council 20 years and now I'll have 16 years as mayor. I won, I believe, because people believed in me, because my relationship with them was one of integrity and character.
So you became, as you mentioned, you became mayor in 2008. You earned your fourth term in the 2019 election, which made the election earlier this month a lot easier on your end, not being up for re-election. But when you came into office in 2008, did you anticipate at that time that you might still be the mayor in 2020, heading into 21?
No, I really didn't. I'd like to say yes, but I really did not. I expected to serve a couple of terms, like most mayors do. Normally, after a term, unless you have a scandal or something, you probably stand a pretty good chance of winning a second term. But as my second term finished, is about the time that we really began to grow our community. And a lot of things that you and I have been talking about began to take form, and we began to get some new business development downtown. Some of our major clusters, like the insurance cluster, began to grow almost exponentially. Even our manufacturing began to come back. Dana Corporation, which almost closed, began to come back with a rather robust re-entry into it. And General Motors is now one of the top GM plants in the country, and I can go on and on. As I mentioned, education began to blossom, and we have a number of college offerings now in the community. Hospitality, we have probably more restaurants per capita than almost any city.
I was going to say there's too many things going on near the end of that second term. You had to want to stay on and see those to fruition.
That's exactly right. And I thought, well, at the end of the third term, most of those will be finished, and maybe a few more. Well, it just so happened that it continued, and now we have some significant announcements that we're going to be making soon in the city of Fort Wayne, which I'm very, very excited about. But I try to say this as often as I can, Tom. It's we mayors, we try to do our share of work, but if you don't have a staff that is really competent in what they're doing and real professionals in what they're trying to offer, it's going to be very difficult to go anywhere. A lot of my division directors, a lot of my cabinet members, they've forgotten more than I will ever know in some of their areas. But to sit back and listen to them and watch them really do what they've been trained to do is absolutely fascinating. And because of that, it has been a tremendous experience to sit down with 12 people and just really watch them do what they want to do and what they're trained to do. True professionals. So it's been great.
Well, Mayor, you mentioned some announcements coming up. We won't ask you specifics on those, but there's always the what's next, But
Sure.
what do you hear from citizens who again they're enjoying things, that they're happy, they're coming back, but what's on the horizon? What else are they looking for that you're trying to meet the needs of?
Well, I still think that there is a tremendous desire to have our downtown expand. We have our latest venture was the Electric Works initiative. This is the old General Electric plant, 1.2 million square feet, divided pretty much in half by one of our major corridors. So we have about 700,000 feet on one side, 500,000 feet on the other. We are experimenting now with turning the first half around, making it buildings that still have that kind of historic exterior, but inside those buildings would be a much more contemporary offering as far as office space, Again, hospitality offerings, incubator space, educational offerings. There's going to be some healthcare offerings to really try to almost have uh, a city within those walls in an attempt to try to move our city a little bit south out of the historic defined area of downtown. And we're also going north. I think I can say now that we have about 40 acres of land right on the other side of the river. Our river pretty much was a historic boundary of our downtown. Nobody went over the river. As long as you were south of the river, you were downtown. You went over the river, you were out of downtown. Well, now we're beginning to go over the river with some additional sports offerings, hospitality offerings, and all of a sudden now our river is becoming part of our downtown. So I guess our citizens are not finished growing our downtown. So I think that's still going to be a major area of concentration for at least the next 3 or 4 years.
Well, and probably the one of the understatements of all time, something like the Electric Works project that's been on again, off again, back on, probably one of the more complex things that I imagine you've worked on. Are you pleased with, as of today, where it's at and the prospects going forward?
It was on again, off again. It's a $280 million project, which is that's some real money for a city our size. And it is very complex. You're talking historic tax credits, new market tax credits, you're talking loans, you're talking grants. There's all kinds of financial contributions to this thing as far as the access to the capital necessary to build this thing. And it's going to take 3 or 4 years to build it. But there were a lot of players. And initially, I think our redevelopment commission, who was kind of overseeing this, as well as our capital improvement board, there was some concern that one developer alone had the wherewithal to take it across the finish line. So they put a pause on it and they asked the developer to partner with another developer that might have a little more experience in that type of approach. And they did. They also asked for another investor from a financial perspective. And that took a little while, but they got one who's well recognized in our community. So they brought 2 more things to the table that those committees wanted to have in place before we moved it forward. They came into place, a new agreement's been signed, and there's still some millions of dollars out there that need to be put into place through city council and so on. But I'm very happy with where it is now. I'm much more comfortable than I was. It's still an experiment. We don't know whether or not it's going to take off. We think the components that are put in place now will help it be much more sustainable than we originally thought. So we were a little worried about that, but it's raised my comfort level significantly. So we'll see. It's in their hands now as far as the developer and the construction companies and so on.
Last couple of questions as we wrap up. I'm not sure there's ever too much off or downtime when you're serving as a mayor, similar to a university president or a certain business leaders. But if you do have that spare time, what are some things you like to do to relax, or any hobbies that you might have?
Well, I do have a few grandchildren who I adore. And from time to time, my children let me see them. So that's always a pleasure. But as far as downtime, I love to read. I like to read things beyond governmental paperwork that unfortunately I have to take home from time to time. But I do enjoy reading. I just finished a book called Caste, Caste, and it's rather new on the market. But Isabella, I can't remember her last name. But it was a fantastic book about the caste system in the United States and India, and unfortunately during World War II in Germany. Before that, I read The Room Where It Happened. That's a tremendous book. But if I really want to get away from that and really want to read something that's just fun reading, I happen to like David Balducci. he's writes detective books, and I know it's kind of really off the governmental track, but that's just fun, entertaining reading.
Everybody needs a little bit of that, so no, that's not a problem at all. Final question.
Sure.
Thinking about this from either a professional or a personal standpoint, but at the end of the day, what has made a great day for Mayor Tom Henry?
Oh boy.
That's the one where we put everybody on the spot a little bit. It's a tricky
Well,
one.
if you allow me to give you two things. First of all, I love going to schools, particularly elementary schools. First of all, these young students, I enjoy talking to them because they don't have an agenda other than this innocent curiosity. And it's refreshing. It's almost like a respite for me. But yet they're terribly interested in what the mayor, or some of them refer to me as the president of Fort Wayne. But to be able just to spend some time with these first through eighth graders, because that's when they're forming their character. That's when they're forming their morals. That's when they're forming their base. And to be able to be a part of that early, because I'm a huge believer in education. I think it starts at that age, or if not before. So I love going to schools. So if I have a day where I've gone to a couple of schools and spent an hour or so with students, that to me is a refreshing day. I can go home feeling very comfortable. Now, on the other side, if I'm in a position on a given day to be able to provide the capital necessary to get certain projects done. I work a lot with my finance division, trying to figure out revenue streams and how we can maneuver those around to meet certain needs. And at the end of the day, if I can say, yes, we were able to put together a financial package to do this in our city, that's a great day for me. And because I think access to capital is probably one of the biggest challenges that we mayors have, to be able to put things together to move our city forward. So if at the end of the day, we figured out a way to do it, that's a great day.
Well, those are two excellent answers, and I hope there's days where you can do both in the same day, combine them both.
Wouldn't that be a great day?
School visits in the morning and solve some capital challenges in the afternoon. That would make for an enjoyable evening.
Boy, wouldn't it?
Well, Mayor Tom Henry, representing Fort Wayne, our 2020 PNC Community of the Year, congratulations and best of luck moving forward.
Thank you so very much.
All right. We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. We've been able to bring all four of the Indiana Chamber's 31st annual award winners to you within the last few weeks. We appreciate you listening, and we will return in 2 weeks back on our regular schedule with in-chamber podcast conversations continuing. Thanks as always for listening.